So it.
Yeah.
You just put the number in.
I said it, check it. So next week, and then I will, you send, you call me. I will talk to you, right? Okay. So we can do it.
How many number? How many number?
No, we love that.
Like that.
Harold. We love that. That's it, sister. I guess because I always tell my mommy she's so wrong. Because my
Okay.
birthday is
Love
November
that
5th.
from BIF.
If you count 9 months, you realize I'm 9 days. So I'm like, naughty. It was full of love, but naughty put love. So
Okay.
my
Very
mom
nice
told me
meeting you
to
guys.
see that,
Uh-huh.
and I guess that's
That's
why.
fine, Mom, you can save it.
But we'll be in touch.
Yes, and y'all can expect a
Thank you so much.
WhatsApp message from me.
Okay.
Like I said, we're in the beta stage right now. I do have an educational director.
Mhm.
She's in Freeport.
Mhm.
And she's another one. She teaches etiquette
Okay.
because what we want to do is do corporate etiquette. Because God knows these people don't have coffee.
Hello, hello, hello. Can anybody hear me?
Good afternoon, everyone.
Kendra, everyone. Anyone else out there?
Good afternoon.
Hi, Janisha.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Chrisita. Just giving the others an opportunity to check in. So if you need to make another cup of coffee or something like that.
Out there, everybody. Shit. Wow.
Alison, are you there? Hmm.
I think there may be an audio issue.
You think so, Kendra?
Yes, sir, because no one is actually speaking. I don't hear anybody except you.
Yeah.
I said good day, but someone else is talking when I said it.
Okay, there's Jeffrey.
Good afternoon.
Who said good afternoon? Oh, I say that. Okay. So we're coming on slowly but surely. I see Annalisa. Annalisa, is that you?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay, great, great. I saw a whole bunch of case studies coming in. I was happy to see that.
Yes, have you gotten a chance to look at any?
I started looking at some of them. Certainly between now and your final exam, I was hoping you have an opportunity to read through them. I hope you guys found it, if not interesting, hopefully enlightening in terms of some real world situations, some of the crazy governance issues that occur out there in the real world, out there outside of the Bahamas, in countries that are not even English speaking countries. The idea is doesn't matter what language, what culture, governance is universal or is supposed to be universal. And hopefully by the time you got through that case, it gave you that feeling and a few more hints about what you should expect your organization to be doing from a governance perspective. Okay.
Dr. Wilkinson, just a question. I note that you said that we were supposed to get additional notes, and I got sidetracked. I didn't have a chance to remind you. Was
Right.
the note sent out?
No, I didn't send the notes, and I didn't send it because I decided I wouldn't burden you guys with that additional information for your final exam. We'll just focus on what we've done so far and what we finish up today. However, I will help somebody read over some of the material just for information purposes, but you won't be tested on that material next week. Okay. I've already written your final exam, so that additional information will just be information, especially for persons who may be connected to the securities market or who might become connected to the securities markets. Um, I'm sure some of you have heard, if not all of you, about the FTX debacle, haven't you? No? FTX?
Yes, I heard about the big
Alison
mess.
heard about it. The only person in the room who heard about FTX? My. That's interesting. Because that
I did as well.
either heard about FTX.
I said I'll make a nice case study for you next time teaching this class.
No doubt, no doubt about it. You're absolutely right. Uh, yes, a case study for the ages. I may even use some of that to create my own little case study. But one way or the other, it is a clinical, current, and devastating example of the results of poor regulation to some extent, and by extension, poor governance. Certainly, the behavior of FTX runs directly in connection with this kind of course. This kind of course is really designed just by its very nature and its discussion to try to avoid issues like FTX. Now, the crazy governance stuff that took place in FTX is not new to the world. Governance issues have been around from almost the beginning of time, and they've been violated from the beginning of time. But here we are in a modern society still talking about it, still finding it's very critical to organizations if they're going to be run well, and still finding people like Sam Bankman-Fried who keeps trying to circumvent the system of governance and then pleading ignorance about how sorry he is, Alson. Do you believe it, Alson? Is he sorry?
My whole thing about this is that, they look at the Bahamas as a soft place that they can just run amok. And they came and they did it because our regulations were poor and cheap. The government, I don't think the government did a proper due diligence, and they just rushed to pass laws because of the amount of money they see dollars and signs flash in their face. The company is performing good in Hong Kong. Why would they run here? Because of the weak laws we had, and they took advantage of it. The guys just make sure everything is good and settled before they strike, and when they strike big. And now
Unfortunately,
we left to carry the bag with a bad reputation.
unfortunately, it's a terrible governance situation. It's a horrible reputational issue. And I don't know when we will get past this one. I thought blacklisting was the one to get past, but that is a minor issue apparently compared to this madness with FTX. And what happened, it's a sad situation. Those of you who live and work in the Bahamas and who are part of this governance class, if you haven't heard about the FTX issue, find out. It's everywhere. Google it, Google it. It's everywhere, somewhere. Read it and see exactly what I've been telling you guys for the last 10 weeks about not adhering to the principles of good governance. And notice, Alison would know, he's familiar with this. Notice a great deal of that governance violation had to do with the cash and accounting process. True or false, Alison?
Correct.
Okay. And it's going to continue to be that way until they try to unravel that whole mess. The financial statements, which of course you guys are going to get a question on. I'm just telling you up front. So be able to do a simple balance sheet and income statement. If you can, it would be helpful to you next week. That's a hint. But the financial statement itself, for a multi-billion-dollar crypto creepy exchange, was so simplistic. I don't know if you saw the copies that was published, Alison, or anyone? No?
Every
So-
day, look at it. It's
so-
getting worse and worse.
Yes, so simplistic. Yes, I mean, a first semester bookkeeping student could have done a better job in terms of structuring that multi-billion-dollar statements actually, because there are several of them for several different silo entities. It is a mess of major proportions. Okay, and that's only the tip of the iceberg. Unfortunately, like Alison said, they found the Bahamas to be a soft jurisdiction. They came with lots of money. Now, the Bahamas is not the only country that they moved with lots of money. Reports have it that the Democratic Party received $40 million from FTX, US, that another 10 million was given to some other political thing in the US. There were significant payoffs around the world. We have no idea to what extent. Those are just bits and pieces that have leaked and that have been alleged so far. So, for those of you who actually finishing this class, it couldn't have been more timely. FTX could not have been more untimely. But please take a note, take a look at it, read it up a little bit, give yourself some idea as governance students as to what not to do. Okay, that's what we've been talking about in one form or another the entire semester, and about the implications of poor governance. And then suddenly, as we approach the end of our semester, Sam Bankman-Fried decides to create a monster, a future case study, and put the Bahamas on the international world stage as a soft flicking jurisdiction to go to. That's not good. Now, don't get me wrong, class. We are not soft. That will be the perception, and FTX will be the evidence. Even though in principle, it is not true. We are one of the most strict jurisdictions in the world compared to countries like the US, Canada, and the UK, and others. But sometimes it only takes one bad apple. And if you're a small country, the bad apple gets smelly in a hurry and takes a longer time to get cleaned up. Wow. Some food for thought. Who would have thought we would have been in this mess? My. And so you guys are now graduating as governance students. If you had an excuse before, you certainly don't have one now. Okay? You have to go out there wherever you work or wherever you will work. Some of you will change jobs a few times before it's all over. Please keep in mind some of these principles. Because as you can see, whenever we violate them, all hell breaks loose. My. So, Alson, question for you, since you're a little familiar with this. Ready?
Go ahead.
Sounds suspicious, yeah? Suspicious transaction. A lot of suspicious transactions went on with FTX, but nobody reported anything to the
Securities Commission.
not more importantly, the FIU.
Yeah.
Okay. More importantly than the Securities Commission, the FIU. Hi, Janisha. Yeah. Question, Alison. Why hasn't Sam Bankman-Fried been arrested yet?
They have to do but first of all, like I said, the Bahamas, we are weak. Our police force doesn't know nothing but trading and inside trading and all this different stuff. So I guess they are relying on information they're getting. And then, again, you have FTX is challenging our court system over here, saying that we don't have the jurisdiction because their case is now being heard in Delaware, and I also think up in New York. So, but again, I don't think all police forces capable to handle that. So
We're not capable of handling that?
I don't think so. I think they have to rely on other information, to get this to get to the bottom of this, and
Yeah. Let me just say this for the record, since you're governance students. That may be so. But see, right now, this thing is more about perception than reality, even though the reality in itself is absolutely intense as well. But I'm not suggesting that he is guilty, but I am suggesting that there is suspicion and great suspicion, and many people have already suggested it, and some persons have produced what they believe is evidence already.
Yep.
Okay. Now, we as a jurisdiction have been put in that position by this guy. I don't give a damn who he is. How about that?
But again, if you've been following, it sounds like a lot of prominent behemoths involved in that.
Alson, I'm not naive. Notice I'm speaking totally oblivious of that madness. I know exactly who and what and why. This is nothing new. See my point? I'm just speaking. It's like when we pick up a textbook to do governance or accounting or economics or whatever, we study what we ought to do, correct?
Mm-hmm.
The textbook doesn't talk about all the criminal things that we do within the context of academia. It talks about what we ought to do. And so I'm I'm restricting my comments onto what it ought to have been. We know all the other blah, blah, blah. Just so those guys got the 40 million in the US and some millions elsewhere. However, my point is this. There is no doubt that something has run amok. Everybody knows that Sam is the ultimate beneficial owner and perpetrator of this thing. Even if we don't have any evidence yet, or the court has not been case has not come up yet in terms of what is going on. I think as a result of the reputational damage that could happen to us potentially, at minimum, we should have arrested him on suspicion, question him in the best way we can, hold him for the maximum time, and released him just to let the world know we don't flick and jive. How's that, Alison?
But more than likely, they may have done that,
No, they haven't.
No?
No. And if they have, they kept it a secret because it was
They
not.
only released a statement saying that it's under investigation.
That's all. What we should have had on the front page.
Well, when they say under investigation, that doesn't mean that they would not have interview. Now the difference is they may interview him, but in terms of I'm speaking from police side of it because I'm also a police reserve, so they will more than likely pick him up and do a quick review interview with him and then release. But like I said, and gather more information and then
I know that's the soft part of the Bahamas that he's relying on. See, exactly my point. I know that. That's probably already happened. Okay. In fact, it is alleged.
Mr. Wilkinson, this is Alexandria. I thought that they was extraditing him to United States for extortion. Because I understand that the United States wanted him and the Bahamas was extraditing him to United States for extortion. No?
That is what is being thrown around. That's not confirmed.
No. FTX has the Bahamas is investigating, and the Bahamas court, I think, issued a seizure. And FTX is saying the Bahamas should not get involved because the matter is now being challenged in, I think there's a class action lawsuit against FTX. And they're saying this matter is now being heard in Delaware. I think one is being heard in Delaware and one is being heard in New York.
Listen to me very carefully. Whatever is involved, we have an FTX Bahamas, company. And so whatever assets are held in that company, we have jurisdiction over it. Now, whatever assets are held in the US companies, they're free to run them down in Delaware or anywhere else. But whatever assets we have in the Bahamas, we have jurisdiction over those assets. That's the point. But going back to the arrest, I know they may have questioned him, but they should have arrested him on suspicion just for the record, so we could send the message that we don't play either and put it on the front page. Bankman-Fried arrested under suspicion, even if we let him go. But then, what may have caused that not to happen, Alson? Okay. Governance, see, the point I'm trying to make to you guys, this governance thing is a serious thing. It is not just purely academic. See? For some of you might think, oh, this is an interesting class to do because it has some good stuff, and by all means. But make no mistake that in practice, this is not purely academic. This is very serious business with legal and criminal implications involved. That's the point. So when you step out there and be assured that this governance thing you've been messing around with is not just academic. On my mind, as some of you might get to see as you move forward in your careers. Wow. All right. You guys have a challenging time ahead of you. and I say you guys because I'm moving towards the other end. I've already fought my old battles back in the day and still get caught up every now and then for some strange reason. But you guys have quite a time ahead of you and you need to be prepared to make some hard decisions. Otherwise, you will fall into the same category that Alison referred to earlier. What is that category? Alison starts with F, S. Which one is that? Yeah. Soft. My. Okay. So then to softer matters now. Because that's some crazy heavy stuff if you really start thinking and messing with it and understanding it. Okay. To some softer, gentler things. The register. Kendra, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Did I get your case study?
No, sir, I'll send it to you by tomorrow.
Okay, wonderful. That's fine. As long as it's on the way. Alison is here for sure. Yeah, Alison Soft Ferguson. So it's soft jurisdiction. Unfortunately, you're absolutely right, and we're not the only culprits. No, sorry, not culprits. We didn't say that. We're not the only area who is perceived this way, unfortunately, Alison. Okay, Jeffries.
Hi.
Yes, Jeffries is here. Shatoya.
Present.
Yes, here for sure. Annalisa.
Hi, I'm here.
Hi, Annalisa. Lucia.
I'm here.
That's Lucia. Okay, gotcha. Renee.
Good day, I'm here.
Hi, Renee. Janisha.
I'm here.
Janisha's here. Tricida.
Here.
Okay,
I'm here.
Gia.
Here.
Okay, Gia. Alexandria. Alexandria is off and running
I'm
somewhere.
here.
Alexandria is there. Okay, great. Deandra.
Alexandria is here.
Okay, Alexandra is here. Great, Alexandra. Deandra. Benitra. Okay. All right, so folks, welcome to our final session. I was saying for those of you who may have just rolled in, I have your final examination prepared already for next week, Saturday. So you are all set to go. We'll cover the remainder of the material that you'll be responsible for in today's session. And if you learn those accounting definitions, and if you learn how to do a balance sheet income statement, if you learn about the different budgets, and if you learn how to do the simple journal entries we talked about and all that stuff, you really should not have a real problem next week. The only reason for having a problem next week if you do not commit to learning those things I just mentioned, along with the other little bits and pieces. Okay. Remember, my objective is to get you to review the course.
Mr. Wilkinson,
Yes.
I'm still waiting for Miguel to respond to me about taking the exam online for next week. I haven't gotten a response from him as yet. You saw my email?
I did. He hasn't responded.
No, not as yet.
Okay. I'll send him a follow-up email.
Okay.
I think one or two other students are joining an online session as well. Okay, somebody as well. So I'll send them a follow-up email, see if we can get that sorted out before next week. If you don't,
Mr. Wilkinson,
yeah, hi.
in regards to that as well, would we be taking the exam early in the morning or would it be regular class time?
as far as I'm aware, it should be regular class time.
Okay,
But what I will do, just to make sure that we don't have any unnecessary hiccups, I will confirm it, okay? So that's virtual for Alexandria and exam at regular class time. I'll confirm that. If it's not going to be at regular class time, I'll send you a note. If you don't hear from me on it, that means it's regular class time, okay? Anybody get that?
Yes.
Okay. Alexandria, if you don't hear anything from me on that matter by, let's give Miguel until Monday. By Monday, just drop me a note so I can start pressing him after that for confirmation. Because Miguel gets tired of this and that and a million things and things go over his head. And sometimes you have to send him second and third reminders for some reason every now and then. So if you don't hear anything from me on Monday on that, just drop me a little notes. I haven't heard anything, so I can see if we can get that locked down. Okay. Okay. So I think we only have a few remaining important issues to discuss today. Those of you who might still have case studies to present, please go ahead and wrap them up and email them to me sometime this weekend. And then please start making preparations for your final exam. I was telling somebody earlier, for those of you who may not have been in at the time, the additional information I was going to send you, I decided not to. Just restricted to what we complete today. If time permits, we'll take a couple of minutes and just kind of read through and have a little discussion about what I was going to send you, just as a matter of information for those of us who are or may be involved or become involved in the securities market, so you can have an idea of the importance of governance in that area as well. Okay, for sure. All right. So last time then, I think we are just wrapping up our discussion on the different types of budgets. Does anybody remember what a static budget is?
One that's flexible.
Yeah, one that's flexible. See that? That could easily be a short answer, a definition question, easy point. And a budget that is not flexible, what is that called?
Fixed.
Fixed budget, absolutely. Okay. If none of you have actually been involved in budgets in your lifetime professionally yet, you should have at least been thinking about a personal budget, which has some of the same principles applied. But the important thing is, if you get into discussions about budgets, you will not be totally out in left field. And one of these days, somebody's going to call you into a budget meeting, ask you to be a part of a budget program, discussion, whatever it is, somewhere in your professional life, sooner or later. Okay, so, but the important thing to do is to know is that budgeting is a very important part of the financial side of governance, because budgets are designed to help us to control spending. Okay, budgets are there to help us to predict our revenues for the future to the best of our abilities, and certainly, and more importantly, to control spending within the organization. And obviously, if we spend more than we budget, the important thing about that, and the reason why it's part of the governance finance process, is because it raises the question, why did we spend more? If we budgeted $1 million for travel in the government and we spend $3 million, Alison, what does that mean? Should anybody raise a question? Alison?
Sorry, I'm just distracted. What you saying?
Since you work for quasi, I wouldn't call it government entity, but since you work for a quasi entity of some kind, if let's say the government budgeted for travel $1 million, and then in 6 months, when you look at the budget, we've discovered that they actually spent $3 million so far. Should that raise a question?
Of course.
Yeah, why?
Well, there was no allocation for the budget in the first place, and here you're overspending, and so you have to explain what's the reason for the overspending. Why?
Yeah, the same question that the opposition was asking recently, why
I
we,
just gonna say that for the
yeah,
travel.
yeah. And so I use that one because that's an active current situation that is real here in our own country, and to show you that budgets are there to help us control how we spend and to monitor how we spend and to give an account how we spend. And that's what governance is all
That's
about.
you're talking for personally, not for government.
Government as
Our
well.
government don't follow that rules.
No government. Don't think we're unique. No government follows those rules. None. Nowhere. We have them. We expect organizations and entities and others to follow the rules, but governments, they have their own thing going. They do whatever they seem to, whatever they like.
Yeah, and then I can tax you for it.
Of course. Why not? They could waste our money and get away with it. Why not? How's that? And that's not unique to the Bahamas. That is not unique to the Caribbean. That is a worldwide phenomenon. Okay. So when we talk about governing ourselves accordingly, we're always talking about doing the right thing, doing it right. But are we internationally and locally? Well,
At least in the UK, there's a penalty for it.
well,
We had the prime minister last 3 days because of what she did.
what did she do?
What she messed up she tried to give her people tax breaks.
What she did?
I think it's something revolved around tax breaks.
In 3 days?
Something she did, and 3 days she had to step down. 3 or 4 days she had to step down.
Yeah, I don't think I think they just kind of harassed and forced her to step down. Or maybe they didn't want her for some reason and they came up with something. If you don't step down, we'll blow the whistle on you.
I think they said she did something that was contrary. So
Yeah,
her own body.
that was a long time before. And everybody knew that before she was selected. But again, welcome to politics, right? Especially in places like the UK where it's very fickle. See, in the Bahamas, we do, and the Caribbean and other countries, Latin America, we do all kind of stuff and we're not embarrassed by it. We keep doing it, going on. But in countries like the UK, for example, where they still try to adhere to the Westminster system of ethics and governance, they're not perfect in it, but they sure as hell police it as much whenever they can and make you miserable whenever it's convenient. How's that? Okay, so yeah. And this is why when we do certain things in the Caribbean, especially those that are English-speaking Caribbean countries like the Bahamas, the question often comes up as to why don't we adhere to the Westminster system that they have in the UK? Well, because that means if you're accused of wrongdoing, you should just step down. There's no excuse. Shut up and step down. Well, we don't do that. Okay, no English-speaking Caribbean country. Okay. In the UK, they do it from time to time, and they're actually successful sometimes. Okay. Interesting that nobody's pursued why she only spent 3 days. You would think that they would have spent more time, but the whole world, including Britain, decided to forget that fairly instantly for some reason. It's a pity we can't do that with FTX. Okay, more money involved. All right, so I say all that to say you should be aware of the different types of budgets, what they are and why budgeting exists in the first place. I'm sure many of you are familiar with your own personal budgets. The principle is kind of the same for personal, business, or countries. Okay, for sure. All right, so let's look at the sample budget that you have. I know it looks complicated if you just look at it, but it really is not. Let's take a look. Does everybody see the summary budget, sample budget? Everybody see it? Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
Oh, do you guys see the sample budget?
yes.
Okay. I guess that one yes speaks for everyone. All right, if you look at the summary section on the left-hand side, you see, by the way, what kind of budget is this anyway? Let's see if you guys have your thinking caps on. What type of budget? You've seen a statement like this before, and you'll be tested on one, not as long as this, but you will be tested on one. What kind of budget is this? Take a guess. Don't worry about it. Let it rip.
Looks like a financial budget.
Getting warm, more specifically.
A company budget,
Getting warm, more specifically.
income,
Yes. Income statement budget. Thank you very much. Who said that?
Gia.
Gia said that. Gia, what made you come up with that? You're correct. Why did you say that?
Because it talks a lot about the income details and expenses.
Which means that you actually had to stop and look at it, correct?
Sure did.
Aha. So it's just interesting thing about looking at something, because you could look and then you look and then you look. There are different kinds of look. And of course, the closer you look, the sooner you will get to the bottom of what you're trying to see. So yeah, she's right. It's an income statement budget. And the reason is because it has a whole bunch of income items on it and a whole bunch of expense items on it. Does anybody remember what I said the formula was for calculating net income? Like net income? Simple formula. From the income statement we did, how do we arrive at net income? Or net profit?
Is it asset minus liabilities? Sorry.
Now, what I like about that is that you were bloody bold enough to say something. See, that's the whole thing. It doesn't matter if it's right, wrong, or in between. You said it. Now, that's not the correct answer yet, but it's on the way to the correct answer. The only reason it's not correct because it's not the actual balance sheet that we're looking at. It's the income statement. So along those same lines, the simple formula for calculating net profit is this. Net total sales minus total expenses. Whenever sales are greater than expenses, we have net profit. Oh, that's it. Whenever sales are greater than expenses, we have net profit. What about net loss? How do we arrive at a net loss? Can anybody use that information I just did and come up with net loss formula? Net profit is when
Could
sales.
it be when the expenses are greater than the sales?
Simple as that. But it's only simple after you get it and digest it. Absolutely right. Now, even if you don't remember all of these components that we talked about in the income statement and the budget and all that, if you remember that net profit is sales when sales are greater than expenses, you're already on your way to important information. And equally as important, if you can remember that net loss occurs whenever a company's expenses are greater than sales, then you're on the way to a very huge bit of information. Okay? Simple formula for determining net profit and net loss of a company. Same thing with your own personal life. If you make $2,000 a month and you spend $2,500, do you have a surplus or a deficit? Anyone?
Deficit.
Deficit. Why?
Expenses more than your revenue or your income.
Yeah, you every month you're spending more than you earn, which a lot of people do, don't we? Nobody in this class spends more than they earn? Maybe, but I'm not admitting it. That's okay. A lot of people, even if it's not you guys, a lot of people end up spending more than they earn all too often. Okay, for one reason or another. How do they make up the shortfall? They borrow the difference, just like governments. Whenever you open the newspaper, see financial literacy. Whenever you notice, open the newspaper and you see that the government's budget has a deficit of $400 million, what that really means is that the government expects to spend more than it is going to get in tax revenues by $400 million. And so the question will be, where will the government find the $400 million extra? Who knows where they'll find it? Anyone? It's not coming from taxes. Where will it come from?
Borrow.
Borrow. That's why our current deficit is how much? Anyone?
What, over $1 billion?
Over $1 billion. Is that a serious number for a country this small or just no big deal? Anyone?
It is, because we are not a manufacturing company. Everything is imported.
That's the first problem. Okay? If something happens to tourism, dog eat our lunch. If something happens to tourism, dog eat our lunch and the brown bag.
COVID is a prime example.
And for a country this small to have a national debt of over $1 billion is mind-boggling. You guys choose to do a governance class, and I'm glad you did. Because some of you may not even have been aware of this stuff. If I only prick your imagination and send you off to think about it, because you guys are going to be impacted by it in one form or another, and so will your children. And if we don't be careful, your children's children. That's how serious governance and finance issues are for real. I'm on mine. Okay. Like Alison said, on to softer stuff, the sample budget. All right, so if you notice, if you look at the sample budget in the top left-hand corner, we have a summary of total income, total expenses, showing there, and then income from or loss from operations. Let me ask you guys something. What is the total income shown in the summary? Actual. Total income, actual. Does anybody see it?
1,432,500.
$500. And the budgeted amount, is it higher or lower than the actual?
Lower.
Lower. So, in this sample budget, are we under or over budget? In terms of net income or sales?
Definitely
Over budget.
over. Definitely over.
Definitely over. Is that good or bad?
Definitely good.
Definitely good. So if those of you who may not be familiar with budgets, welcome to why it is an important tool, because it gives us important information at the end of the month, quarter, year about what's going on, how we performed, and whether we performed according to expectations. And whether some of you know it or not, some of your bosses are being judged on whether they meet budget requirements or not. Their performance is judged on whether they meet budget requirements or not. So while you go in and just do your little thing every day in the corner somewhere, your bosses, wherever they are oftentimes being judged on these budgetary numbers. So whoever's in charge of this income, to see that overage, they're like, thank you, God. We're over and not under. Does everybody see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What about the total expenses? They total actual for the year 339,760. Are we under or over budget?
Under.
Really? Look again.
Oh, sorry, we're definitely over budget.
We're over budget. What does that mean for the expenses?
Higher than we anticipated.
Yeah, put it in real language. We spend more than we planned. How's that? But don't we do that in our own households? We spend more than we plan every month, don't we? Like, this is all I'm spending for gas this month or lunch. I'm spending $10 a week times 4 weeks, that's $40. And then the month end rolls around, you look at how much you actually spend, $140. Then you're wondering, what the hell did I eat that took me to $140? Then you remember, oh, I took somebody to lunch and I had an expensive lunch twice. And then all of a sudden, you see why your budgetary numbers were destroyed for the month. So this company spent more than they budgeted. How much more, anyone? How much more?
Looks like 25,000 more.
Yeah, 25,000 rounded. Okay, so whoever's in charge of that operation will have to explain why. If that's one of you, you'd have to explain why. And simply saying, I don't know why, it could be anything, is not enough. That's not going to fly. You better call your head of accounting and tell them, find out why we spent $25,000 more. Because I have to report to the board why we went over $25,000. Because sometimes people waste company money. Did you know that, anyone?
Yes, sir.
Yes, just like we waste taxpayers' money, just like we waste church money, just like we waste all kinds of people's money. Do wives waste husbands' money?
No, sir.
No, I like that. Do husbands waste wives' money? Alison, you're the only one left. Do husbands waste wives' money?
Don't put my foot in my mouth.
I know.
No, they don't waste wives' money. They have to get it first.
Yeah, they have to get it first. Alison, you have the answer. Okay? You probably knew the answer, and if you were afraid to answer, she's answered for you. You can't waste what you can't get access to, Alison. Okay? How's that for an upfront and direct and correct, honest question? Sorry, answer. Absolutely. It's hard for us to get our wives' money, but it's easy for them to get. Alison?
What's yours is mine, and what's mine is mine.
I was just waiting for that comment to come out.
You know, I love it that she's forthright in it because that's what governance is all about, being honest and forthright, even though we may not always agree. See, that's the beauty of
Hello?
governance. It's not just greed and theft and whatever, because they don't want to disclose bad or unacceptable news. And that's no excuse for not being upfront. Okay, way to go. All right. Based on the formula I gave you earlier, did this company generate net income or loss? You look at it, did this company generate net income or loss? Based on the formula I gave you at the beginning. Pick one, make a guess.
Net income,
Net income, why do you say that?
because, hold on. Because their income was 1.4, the expenses was 339. So the income was a positive.
Okay, I like how she puts that. And what she's really saying in accounting terms is that income was greater than somebody. What she's saying in accounting terms, she said is positive. In accounting terms, we say that income is greater than
Expenses.
expenses. And whenever income is greater than expenses, the company generates net income. Similarly, when expenses are greater than income, the company suffers a loss. Very important, simple principle to keep in mind, okay? You don't have to be an accountant, CPA, and all that to understand the importance of that simple formula. Whenever you go to sit on a board or in a meeting or anything such thing, or you pick up a newspaper or whatever the case might be, or the discussion comes up, if you know those three things, it'll move you forward rather quickly into whether there's a positive thing going on in that entity or a negative thing. Okay. Is net income a good thing, class? Is net income a good thing? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes, it is. Does that make a net loss a bad thing?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. In other words, if a company continues to suffer losses, eventually it will have to close its doors. In order for a company to continue on and doing business, it must seek to generate profits as often as possible. You can have some years when you generate losses, but not consistently. If you consistently generate losses, you soon will not be able to pay your bills, and then you will have to close your doors because you're not making enough revenue to cover your costs. And many companies in the Bahamas and around the world suffer that loss by the hundreds every month. Okay? Those companies that whose doors are still open, they're the ones who continue to generate enough profits, enough revenue in order to keep their doors open. Those who can't and keep on paying more than they're earning, you will have to soon close your doors. Because when you can't pay BEC, they're going to do what? Anyone knows? Let's say you have sales of
Disconnect you.
Yeah,
Disconnect you.
they're disconnecting because you're not generating enough revenue to pay them. And if you don't pay salaries, what are staff gonna do? They're gonna say, "We love you, you'll stay and work free." No, they won't. They're gonna leave. And sooner rather than later, because of not generating enough revenue, whatever business you're in, you will have to shut down. Okay. All right. So that is how a budget works. In terms, by the way, in terms of this net income, is net income an overage or under in the budget summary? The net income, is it an overage or under in the budget?
Over
Over by how much?
89,570.
89,570. Over anything for net income is always a great idea, just as over anything in net income is always a great idea. The only damper that this company had in this budget year was the expenses that went over by 25,000. But then compared to how well they did on the income side, $25,000 extra is not a big deal. And these are all the financial discussions that will come up at the management and board level when the results come in. That's why we have budgets, period. To monitor and to give an account for spending and to plan. Okay? Plan. How much are we planning to spend next year? How much did we actually spend next year? If we went over, why? If we went under, why? That way you can keep tabs on how the resources and the company are being used. Without that kind of information, management will lose their grip eventually. And then people like Sam and others can get away with murder. Because nobody is checking them. Okay. So, under the summary are simply the details of what we just discussed in the summary. So all the income details would made up the 1432. There's a whole list of revenue items. You can see them: commission, fees, commitment income, rental income, royalties income, other income not described, all come together for the total 1432 that we saw in our summary. Same thing with expenses. We have a whole bunch of expenses broken down, as you can see: salaries, commissions, advertising, delivery, shipping, travel, administrative and selling expenses, etc. And so all of these expenses, when we total them up, give us our actual total of 339,760, as we saw in the summary. Okay. Same thing for the budgeted side. So we can then take our experience with the total summary budgeted numbers, and then we can look at them one by one if we want to. Okay. So more than likely, this summary budget part of it will be looked at by the board members who don't have time to look at details. And then the management persons will probably look at the details to see, okay, what was up or down in each category of income and what was up or down in each category of expenses, and have a long discussion, including lunch, caviar, and wine, and whatever, to discuss the ups and downs of this budget. If you understand some of those principles, then you are well on your way to an understanding of why the budget is important in the financial governance process. That's the real deal. The more board members understand how these things work, in addition to the accounting side of it, the more productive board discussions will be from a financial literacy side. A lot of times we spend time with risk management, compliance, audits, and all that kind of stuff, and general controls, which is good. We talked about those earlier. But the financial side of it is equally as important, if not sometimes more so in some cases, and the same amount of attention needs to be paid with regards to the financial side of governance. Okay? Unfortunately, for many companies, they don't spend as much time as they should, for one reason or another. All right, any questions so far? Okie dokie. So then we can get into the final part of our discussion, which is the audit. The audit is a big deal, should be a big deal. Anybody knows what an audit is? Anyone? What is an audit? Anybody's ever been a part of an audit?
So an audit is when either the audit department or an outside audit team comes in and says, let me see for the past year, 2 years, transactions or financial statements to prove you following regulations set by whichever central bank or regulator you fall under.
That's not a bad definition of an audit. We have several different versions, and that's a pretty good one. Okay? Internal and external auditors coming in and checking things to see if they meet company policy and compliance and regulatory policies, by all means. Okay? So I don't know if any of you guys have ever been a part of any audited by external auditors? Anyone who's been involved
Been in several.
Yeah,
Every
several.
2 weeks.
Indeed. Every
Every 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
At least that's all it is here.
Yeah, I like that. Every 2 weeks. Normally it happens once a year, but it seems like every 2 weeks because the year goes so quickly before the announcement is made that the auditors are either coming or they
You have
are,
to pull 1,000 things.
yes, they start to pull 1,000 things. And I'm so happy that you mentioned the pull 1,000 things because we're gonna mention shortly why they ask you to pull 1,000 things. Okay, so hold that thought, but that's a very important point. Pull 1,000 things. They get on our bloody nerves. Every time you sit down and do some work, they want you to pull something else, pull something else, pull something else. That's what they do. And those of us who work in the firm, when auditors show up, our job is to give them everything they need with a smile. I don't know if the smile will help you audit, if it's a bad audit, but you never know. Still, you want to give it to them with a smile because experienced auditors interpret bad attitudes to mean that some bad things may be happening in that firm as well. So if you can give them the information quickly and with a good attitude, who knows? That may cause them not to ask for 15 other things, depending on their audit program and process. Okay. So I need somebody to read the definition of what is an audit from your notes. There are two definitions that are given. What is an audit? Anyone?
An audit is a systematic and independent examination of books, accounts, statutory records, documents, and vouchers of an organization to ascertain
Somebody?
to,
Okay, there we
to
go.
ascertain how far the financial statements as well as non-financial disclosures present a true and fair view of the going concern.
Okay, that's definition number one. And definition number two?
An audit is the examination of an entity's accounting records as well as the physical inspection of its assets. It is performed by a certified public accountant, CPA. The CPA can express an opinion on the fairness of the entity's financial statements.
All right, thank you very much. So we have two definitions of the audit. They are not conflicting. They complement each other. Basically, the audit is a systematic, meaning that they don't come in helter-skelter. They're asking for stuff, but it's not helter-skelter. By the time the auditors come in, they already have an audit plan. They know what they're going to ask for. They know what they're looking for, and they're asking you to get it so that they can verify to see whether or not your work is consistent with the law, the policy of the company, and with regulatory requirements. Also, the CPA, who normally works for an auditing firm, wants to come in and say whether or not they can express a positive opinion about your audit report that they're prepared. And we're going to see different types of opinions that auditors can give. Some are good, some are bad, and some are ugly. Okay? But for now, it's that systematic review of the documentation of the operation to see if the business is being run according to compliance and regulatory and statutory requirements, as well as whether or not the financial records, statements are being prepared and conducted in accordance with what we call generally accepted accounting principles, GAAP. Okay, so those of you who have been part of audits, you're familiar with that definition. And those of you who have not been a part of an audit, I don't know why not yet, but somewhere before your professional life is over, you probably would be, okay, in one form or another. Some of you may have been in audit and not know, because the auditors have come in and asked your supervisor for information, then your supervisor comes to you, and you may not even have been the wiser, knowing that auditors are in doing what we see in our definition. But either way, that's the jobs, and when they come in, they don't want any delays. They don't want anybody to hold up information. They don't want anybody to give them an attitude. Because believe it or not, all these things actually occur when auditors come into different types of firms. Okay, it's sure. All right. But before we go into the other different types of audits, let's differentiate between accounting and auditing. That's an important thing to know. Anybody knows the difference between accounting and auditing? You can use your notes.
Accounting is the daily process of recording and reporting financial information, whereas an audit is an independent review of financial records,
Yeah.
usually conducted annually or quarterly.
Okay. So accounting records the daily transactions, day to day, all the transactions that come in. We know a little bit about that now from the accounting cycle. By the way, it might be helpful to remember the accounting cycle. You never know where that question might show up. Okay. Can anybody remember the accounting cycle without looking? Let's give it a shot. Anyone? Don't worry about whether it's right or wrong. Just start.
Um,
Okay, Gia. Step one.
that's when you put the entry in, then you have the unadjusted trial balance,
Okay.
then you prepare corrective entries.
Keep going.
Have the adjusted trial balance. And then you have the financial statement, I think.
Okay, Gia. That's not 100%, but that's a damn big step forward to correct. That's a good effort without looking. So you know now when you go back to do your review, you'll fill in the blanks, and that's what this is all about. There's no magic to it at all. Okay? And the point I'm trying to make is when it's time to present stuff and do, man, don't worry about entirely all the time if it's right or wrong. Just let it rip. If it's not entirely correct, then you get the correct thing. If it's not entirely, see, that's how things, that's how you grow. But if you like get spooked each time, man, you wouldn't do anything important. How about that? So that's a good effort. Okay. Can anybody remember a step she may have left out? She mentioned the trial balance, the financial statements, and recording the transaction. Did she leave out anything? Anyone? Fill in the blank.
Posting to the ledger.
Yeah, posting to the ledger. Okay, that is the step she didn't include. Yes. And what's the first thing in the cycle? She mentioned recording. What happens before the recording?
You have to recognize
Yeah,
that there's a transaction and identify what that is before you can post.
yeah, even before you can record. Okay, so yes, you recognize the transaction, identify what's to be debited, what's to be credited. It's called analyzing the transaction. Then you go ahead and record it, as she said, and then you go ahead and post it, as the other person said. And then you go to your trial balance and your financial statements. Okay, so good stuff, guys. That's not bad for not having reviewed yet. Okay, so you can see this stuff is not impossible. You just have to make a little commitment. All right, so accounting then is recording the day-to-day transactions, producing financial statements. Auditing, on the other hand, is coming in and reviewing those financial statements and giving an opinion as to whether or not they meet generally accepted accounting principles. Okay, by all means. All right. Of course, let's not forget the objective of the audit. And in essence, we are told that the objective of the audit is to enable the auditor, to allow the auditor to express or give an opinion on whether the financial statements are prepared in accordance with international accounting standards, also referred to as generally accepted accounting principles. Okay? So the auditors already know the principles. The accounting team, headed by the financial controller, should know the principles and apply them so that when the auditors come in to check, they can say, yes, these transactions are all recorded, and they are recorded and posted appropriately. Wherever the audit finds an error in principle, an error due to maybe mistake, and maybe even errors that are due to fraud, they have a responsibility, in their opinion, to outline those problems for the shareholders to see. Okay? So that is the objective of your audit, in case you wondered. Come in and to see whether those financial statements meet generally accepted accounting principles and international accounting standards. That's what the auditors are thinking every time they come into your firm, and that's what they're looking for. All right, so now that we know the difference between accounting and auditing, the objectives of the audit, we can now take a peek at why we have an audit in the first place, the purpose of the audit. Okay? Another important aspect of the audit function. All right, so let's look at the purpose for a moment. Let me see. I need to find somebody who I probably haven't heard from. Annalisa, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, I just kind of pulled your name out of a hat, out of the student hat. Can you read the purpose of the audit for us? I see 1, 2, 3.
Okay. The purpose of the audit is to provide an independent opinion to the shareholders on the truth and fairness of the financial statements, to determine whether they have been properly prepared in accordance with the GAAP, to report by exception to the shareholders on the other requirements where, in the auditor's opinion, proper accounting records have not been kept.
Wow. Now, I don't know if you guys understand how serious is this for your company. Maybe those of you down the line who don't really get involved may not really appreciate how serious these purposes are. I can assure you that somewhere from supervisory to top management to the board, especially senior management and the board, understand clearly these audit issues. Because if a company has a failed audit, boards can be changed, CEOs and CFOs can be fired. And so when it's time for the audit, depending on the firm and the management and what they've done during the year, they either have a level of comfort or a level of discomfort based on the purposes of this audit. And every audit, notice what is said first. The audit opinion must be independent, meaning that nobody in the firm or anywhere else should be able to influence it. The financial literacy and good governance. Because if a board member or shareholder or senior management or anybody can get the auditor to change their opinion about their findings, that is unethical. And that audit firm might find themselves in trouble. Okay? The audit opinion must be unaffected by anyone. Shareholders, board members, CEO and CFOs, whomever. They should not be able to bribe, persuade, or intimidate the auditor when they have given their opinion. Their opinion is their opinion. It's pretty much final unless it is agreed to make any changes to it. Okay? That's the first thing about the purpose of the audit. Secondly, the audit must conform and make sure that the company is adhering to GAAP. What is GAAP again? Anybody? Anybody remembers what GAAP is?
General accepted accounting principles.
Yes, generally accepted accounting principles, as well as generally accepted auditing principles. Okay? So that's what your auditors are looking to see. They're coming in to see whether you're following generally accepted accounting principles in your accounting cycle activity and statement preparation, and they will be using generally accepted auditing principles in order to conduct that audit to ensure that the purpose of the audit is carried out 100%. Okay. And then finally, number 3, to report any exceptions. Exceptions to what? Exceptions to GAAP. If the auditor finds that there are certain areas where generally accepted accounting principles are not being adhered to, or certain regulatory requirements are not being met, or certain statutory requirements are not being met, then the auditor must report that as an exception in the audit report. Something like this. We are satisfied that the statements, financial statements, and the company are adhering to generally accepted accounting principle, except with regards to the following. And those items would be considered the exceptions. And they would be the items that are expected to be corrected quickly, sooner rather than later. Once the corrections are made, the auditor can then proceed to give a clean bill of health. Until they're made, those exceptions must be highlighted by the auditor. And no one should be able to persuade the auditor to take them out of the report. Okay? No one. All right. So, what are the different types of audits we have out there? A ton of them, obviously. And why don't we take a moment to quickly go through our list? A lot of times when we hear about an audit, we only think about a financial audit, which is the auditing firm coming in and auditing the financial statements of a particular company. But there are other types of audits that are and can be and are conducted all the time. Let's go from the top. If anybody has a Google, access to Google, that would be good, because then you can help us figure out these different types of audits. First of all, can anybody tell us, use Google, what is a compliance audit? And other students can start looking at the other ones in Google, so when we get to them, we can shout something. What is the compliance audit, anyone?
As a comprehensive view of an organization's regulatory guidelines.
Yeah, that just making sure that whatever regulatory guidelines the organization is supposed to be doing, they're actually doing those things. For example, do they have an AML policy in place? Do they have a terrorism financial policy in place, financing policy in place? Because these are regulatory requirements. Do they have a risk management policy in place? Do they have a monitoring policy in place for clients? All of these are compliance requirements. And so when a compliance audit is being done, all the compliance officer or the external officer, auditor who's called in to do it sometimes, depending on the situation, they're looking to see if these requirements are in place. If they are, they tick the box and say, yes, they are. They check, yeah, yep, yep. Oops, no, no, hell no, and so on. And those compliance issues that are not in place, then management have to go and fix them quickly. Okay. Compliance audit. What about the construction audit? That's interesting. Construction audit? Man, I didn't even know there was construction audit to be done. What is a construction audit, anyone?
Is that to do with the safety?
That's part of it. Anything else? Remember, you can use Google. Don't be afraid to use that guy. You may as well use him up anyway. It's free. Construction has to do with safety. What else?
Is a review of various aspects of a project to ensure they are performing appropriately in keeping with.
Indeed. So there's a project, construction project. The audit will be conducted by the appropriate person to make sure that the safety measures are in place as agreed, that the material is the correct material as agreed, that the spending and the correct vendors and spending as agreed, see? Because if you don't conduct audit, and this is why a lot of projects go to hell, because nobody's auditing them. maybe this part of why Sam was able to go to hell, because nobody was checking Sam. Bankman Friedman from FTX. Okay. As a matter of fact, I need to sue Sam anyway because he has my first name. That's reputational damage to me as well. His bloody name is Samuel. Imagine that. So when I go places and I say, "What's your name?" I say, "Sam." They say, "Bankman Fried." No. I go, "Oh, you're not related." I said, "No." All right. So compliance audits are very important, especially for projects, construction projects in this case, but any other project, to make sure that things are going according to plan. Because we all know if you don't check people, dog eat your lunch, potentially. What about a financial audit? What's the definition of that? Financial audit. Anyone? Remember, Google is free. Financial audit, what's that? I hope I don't find it before you guys.
It's the purpose of a financial audit is to provide assurance that financial statements are presented accurately and in conformity with generally accepted accounting principles, GAAP, allowing business owners to make confident business decisions.
Yes, absolutely. I wish I could put it better. I can't. In essence, it is an analysis of the economic activity of the company, which involves every single thing that she just said. Okay, that's your financial audit. So when your auditors come in every year, every 2 weeks, somebody said it feels like every 2 weeks they're back here, even though it's a year. Time passes quickly, and they're asking for stuff, pulling everything out. Then you have to put everything back, and yeah, but that is the requirement of the financial audit. What about information technology audit? That's interesting. Why would we have an audit of that?
And this was very interesting because to work, they always say, watch what you say on the computer and private message and email and stuff.
What would you say?
Yeah,
You
because
mean,
they used to audit on the computer. So watch what you say.
yeah, they're reading to see if you're saying anything funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. So company email, it's better that you stick to company business. If you put your personal stuff on the company email, they might look at it during an audit, or just technology people who work for the company looking into your email, which they shouldn't do because it's kind of proprietary unless there's a problem somewhere. But people are inherently nosy. We like to look at people's stuff, in people's stuff, around people's stuff, over people, under people. We just like to look. So if you are putting your personal stuff in your company email, I suggest you stop today, as she suggested, because whenever an information technology audit is done, they're not necessarily looking for your personal email. They're looking for other things like whether safeguards are in place so the company cannot be hacked, making sure that the data is properly stored and protected by firewalls, and to see whether or not any new software is required in order for the system to perform more efficiently, to be more secure, and to have greater controls in place. Backups, disaster recovery issues. These are normally the information technology audit issues. But that doesn't mean if they come across your personal stuff that somebody will not read it. Doesn't mean that they may not deliberately go to see if any staff members have any personal stuff in the company email. Okay, for sure. What about this other audit? You don't hear about it at all. It's called investigative audit. Can somebody look that up? What the heck is that? I mean, when we think about audits, we just think about a financial audit. That's it. Investigative audit. What's that? What's that?
I guess that's dealing with fraudulent
Yeah,
misappropriation of funds.
yeah. It is dealing with fraud and misappropriation of assets. Example, FTX. No doubt about it. I'm not saying everything they did was illegitimate, but there's no question that there is fraud along the way. There's no question that there's misappropriation of funds along the way. How much of that fraud and misappropriation we'll be able to discover eventually? Only God Himself knows. Nobody else. Until this process is underway and what is revealed is revealed. God forbid that we'll ever find it all. I doubt it very seriously. My. Yes. As a matter of fact, because of the bankruptcy and liquidation of FTX Bahamas and no doubt FTX elsewhere, there will be a huge investigative audit being conducted. See? All of a sudden, our class stuff is tied up in this immediate problem. Auditors will be called from everywhere, locally and internationally, wherever FTX liquidations and bankruptcies are occurring, to conduct investigative audits to find out where the assets are, first of all, where the hell did it go, and where are they? And secondly, how much of whatever is discovered has been affected by fraud and misappropriation. Wow. Man, you guys are doing this session at a very timely time, thanks to Sam. Bankman-Fried. All right. What about the operational audit? Anybody? What do you think that is? Operational audit. Anyone? When you hear operational, what comes to mind anyway? Nothing? Operational.
Making sure that persons are following all of the policies relating to the operations of a business.
Thank you very much.
Going in and checking to make sure that everybody's following it to the T.
Absolutely. And by extension, if everybody is not following it to the T, what should be done?
Performance management, I don't know.
Well, just what you said, just make sure they're following it to the T. If they're not, make sure they follow it to the T. How's that? Susan, we don't do it this way. This is the way the company policy requires it to be done. Beginning today, we expect you to do it that way. In other words, wherever you find a deficiency, you take corrective action. Okay, so absolutely right. Making sure that's really what she means by following it to the T. Following it to the T implies taking corrective action when necessary. I just pulled out the implication and smeared it a little bit so that you do not miss that point that she made in there by to the T. To the T really means including taking action to fix anything that is wrong. Okay. All right. Wonder why we say to the T. Does anybody know? What's the history of to the T? No? Anyone?
To be exact.
To be exact. Okay, that's a good is that a fact that or is that something you just came up with? Because that could work, to be exact, to the T. All right. I wonder what Google says about to the T. You think that's in Google? Anyone? Somebody type in what does to the T mean? Let's see what Google says. That should be interesting. What does to the T mean? Maybe T means totality. What does Google say?
To a T is sometimes written as to the T. These phrases mean exactly the same thing, but mostly common accepted way. That's what it is. Why do hold on? The obvious suggestion is that it comes from a T in Gov, or just possibly curling. Another is that it refers to a T-square, a term that appears at about the same date or the correct completion of letter T by crossing it.
Okay, it's a completion to expression either way to the T, meaning hitting the ball directly to its source, T-square, whatever, meaning suggesting completion of the exercise. So yeah,
I know T square is, this is just me thinking now. T square is something that they use in like engineering or architecture. And you know,
yes,
with architecture, you have to be like exact, like it has to
that's it.
be perfect.
Thank you, Gia. Absolutely. That's more than likely one of the best expressions for the origins of to the T. Okay, absolutely. It has to be exact. Okay. So next time you say to the T, you're not just making it up. If anybody wants to know where it came from, you can now say, yeah, go to T squared thing, is it, Gia? T squared, or the architectural expressions of T, which means it has to be exact. And then if you don't remember that, tell them Google it. How about that? And they'll see. All right, and then finally, tax audit. Maybe we don't have to look it up. We can just say it out of our heads. What is a tax audit? Tax audit. When the government officers come in to do a tax audit, what are they coming to do? What are they coming to audit?
Accounts and financial information.
Yeah, they coming to see if you're paying the correct amount of taxes to the government. For example, if you own a business and you put in VAT returns, VAT is a tax, correct? VAT is a tax, yeah. So they will send in officers from time to time to check to see if you're using the correct numbers for VAT. Because many companies, they understate VAT, so they pay less taxes, which means they're trying to teeth from the government. The human word for steal. Okay? So tax audits are designed to make sure that companies and individuals where income tax is applied are paying the correct taxes. Because a lot of people are always looking to duck taxes, avoid them, not pay them, especially rich people. The majority of people that pay the right amount of tax are poor, working middle class and poor people. The people who seek to avoid tax a lot are rich people. Because despite all the money they have, they still don't want to pay a bunch of money to the government. So if they make $10 million in a particular year and the tax rate is 20%, how much do they have to pay the government, anyone? If you're rich and you make 10 million and the tax rate is 20%, how much do you have to pay the government? Financial literacy.
You say 20% of 20 million?
10 million.
10 million?
Hmm. Yep, she's doing the right thing. She's working it out. 20% of 10 million.
Five?
How much?
5?
5. Well, 5 is half of 10, so that would be more like 50%. So
Sorry.
1,000?
How much?
500,000?
A little higher than that.
2 million.
2 million. Yes. 20% of 10 million would be $2 million. And so rich people who make $2 million, 10 million, they don't, sometimes they don't even want to pay the 2 million. They want to hide it so they don't have to pay anything. And so or when they make 10 million, they might lie on their tax returns, company or person, and say they made 6 million. So they pay 20% of 6 million rather than 20% of 10 million. Okay, welcome to the real world of financial literacy. Okay, and proper governance. Because see, remember, when you understate your taxes to pay less, that is unethical and illegal. So it's a governance problem. To even understate, it is not good enough to say, well, I did pay some, didn't I? Because I paid it on 6 million. Yes, you did, but you didn't declare the correct amount. So you're out of good governance and breaking the law. And in some countries, you can go to prison for doing that. Lying to the government on your tax returns. In many countries, it's a criminal offense, individual or company. My. Financial literacy and governance, they seem to go hand in hand a lot. All right. There are a lot of people, students, who really should be doing a class like this. I try to encourage persons from time to time to do a class like this. A lot of people don't really understand what we talk about in a class like this until they actually come in and they discover a whole lot of things that they never even heard of before. If they did hear about it before, certainly from a different angle, and a whole bunch of other little pieces that could be very helpful, even for those who may have been aware of some of the issues. Okay, so, all right. So those are your types of audits. Now, having said that, let's look at the types of audit reports that shareholders and board members can expect to receive. Okay, and remember, we're talking about shareholders and board members because what did I say at the very beginning of this class? Where does governance begin? Good governance. Where does it begin? Somebody please blurt it out. Where does good governance begin?
From the
At the
top.
board, at the top.
At the top. Simple. Don't ever be confused about it. I don't care what anybody tells you. It begins at the top. And at the top of the organization is the company's board of directors. They are responsible for implementing it. They are responsible for making sure the staff is doing it. They are responsible for taking any corrective action against anybody, any staff, including board members, who do not adhere to good governance. They are. They cannot say, I didn't know, to get away. You may not have known, but you're still responsible. Just like if I have a child, a minor, and they go out and sell dope, smoke dope, do some nonsense, I may not have known. But as long as they're a minor, they're going to bring that child to me and say, this is your child. This child is your responsibility. And the same thing applies to the organization. Whether the board is aware of it or not, ultimately they're responsible for every failure within the firm. And it's their job to take action to correct any failures that occur. If it includes somebody they know or like in the firm, too bad, they have to deal with it. A lot of times we get stuck with governance issues because we know people, we're related to people, we like people, whatever it is, and we don't take the appropriate action. And then it leads to even more poor governance until something serious happens. All right. So what are the 4 types of audit reports that a board and shareholders can expect to get potentially from the auditor? Well, the first one is what we call an unqualified opinion. Unqualified opinion. The second one is what we call a qualified opinion. The third report or opinion is what we call an adverse opinion. Does anybody know what the fourth one is? What is the fourth one?
Disclaimer of opinion.
Disclaimer of opinion. Thank you very much. So we have the unqualified, the qualified, the disclaimer, and what's the other one? Qualified, unqualified.
Adverse.
Adverse opinion. Okay. So those are the types of reports potentially the board, the shareholders do not normally get all of them, they get one of the four. But now we need to find out from a governance perspective and a board perspective and shareholders perspective, what these four are all about, so we can see and understand why they are so important to this process. Okay. So let's see. Shatoya, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Hey, Shatoya is still with us. Okay, so I'm not. Let's look at the types of audits. Can you read those for us? There are four of them that we just mentioned. Can you just read the four of them for us?
Okay. Okay, so the first one, an unqualified opinion is an independent auditor's judgment that a company's financial records and statements are fairly and appropriately presented and in accordance with GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles.
Okay.
A qualified opinion is a statement issued after an audit is done by a professional auditor that suggests the information provided was limited in scope and or the companies being audited has not maintained GAAP accounting principles.
Number three.
Auditors who deem audit, that's the right one?
Keep going, yes.
Okay, auditors who deem audits as qualified opinions advising whomever is reading the document that the information within the audit is not complete or the accounting method used by the company do not follow GAAP.
Okay, and then the adverse opinion?
An adverse opinion is a professional opinion made by an auditor indicating that a company's financial statements are misrepresented, misstated, and do not accurately reflect its financial performance and health.
Thank you very much. Now, question for this group. From a auditing and governance perspective, which of these opinions so far is the one you would like your shareholders to receive on your board?
Unqualified.
Unqualified. All right. I don't hear any objections. Are there any objections? The unqualified opinion is the one you want. Which of the opinions so far is the one you don't want? Which of the opinions so far that she read is the one that you don't want? Unqualified, qualified, or adverse?
Adverse.
Adverse. Okay. The adverse means again that the
And
opinion.
the company's financial statements are misrepresented, misstated, and not accurately reflect its financial performance and health.
Absolutely, a complete mess. Which one?
Cooking the books.
Yeah.
In other words.
Cooking the books and worse. Okay. Cooking the books is not the worst thing that can happen, but it's one of the very bad things that happen. Which of the three categories you think FTX would get if they were to be audited?
Adverse.
By all means. Okay, by all means. Okay. Now, we have an in-between opinion so far. That one is called the qualified opinion. Why do you think we say it's,
Question.
yeah,
Why would you agree is advice?
for whom?
FTX.
Why would you disagree?
Reasons or any statements? They have the only thing they said was what the guy Boris, his was one what, let's say for example was $1 billion today and tomorrow it was gone. So why would you say they would that was not that hasn't been an
The
audit.
new interim president who took over from Sam Bankman-Fried said when he looked at the financials, they're worse than Enron, and he worked on the Enron case. He said
Okay.
there were so many
I missed that then. I
misrepresentations.
missed that then.
Yes,
I missed that.
that's why I
Yeah,
said the adverse.
Yeah, I realized you missed that particular one, because if you did, you'd see that the chap, Ray, I think his name, John Ray, I think his name is. John Ray has been around a long time, and anybody who's been involved in Enron has been involved in some serious stinky stuff. Because Enron is one of the older stinky stuff from back in the day. And many of you have not read Enron from a governance perspective, and you're feeling curious between now and your final exam or afterwards, read the Enron story. Okay? FTX is a modern version of
He
another.
said FTX make Enron look like a joke.
Make no mistake about it. And as an accountant myself, I tell you, even the initial statements that have been produced so far out there in the press, you look at them, even a baby bookkeeper could do better. And there's a reason for that. It's not that he couldn't hire the best. They wanted confusion, so you couldn't figure it out. Okay, so yeah, definitely. And maybe when we see the last one in a minute, we might say, not adverse, disclaimer. Let's see. But for the moment, adverse would definitely be the one. The qualified opinion, on the other hand, is neither adverse or unqualified. It's in the middle, which means that the auditor couldn't get what? All the information they needed. The audit was limited in scope. They couldn't get all the documentary evidence, or there have been delays, or something is happening that they cannot get all the evidence that they need for a complete audit. Whenever that happens to an auditor, like people keep saying, the file is lost. We don't see it. That's all we have. We don't know what happened to the rest. Somebody must have stolen it. There was a fire. Whatever we say, to try to get to limit the ability of the auditor to complete the audit by getting sufficient documentary evidence, you might find yourself with a qualified opinion. And that might be, to the extent possible, we've been able to verify this, but we've not been able to verify these things, and they will list a long list of things that they couldn't get evidence on. And therefore, our opinion has to be a qualified one, and it will stay qualified until you can produce the evidence that we need. Nobody wants that either, but it's better than an adverse audit. All right, interesting. Governance stuff for board members and top senior management. When they sit down, they need to be thinking about these kinds of things. I hope that they do. Clearly, with Enron and FTX and others, WorldCom and others who've been doing this crazy stuff, they don't care. Because most of them already know what they are going to do anyway. They've either bribed the auditor or they have stolen and defrauded and misappropriated long before we get to any audit. And by the time we get to an audit, it becomes an investigative audit, not a financial audit. Because now you're investigating for fraud, misappropriation, and the location of the assets. Like, where the hell are the assets? That's the first thing. Then you can begin to ask questions about what happened to them. But it'd be like hell to ask what happened to them if you cannot even find them. All right. Renee, are you still there?
I am.
Okay, Renee, then why don't you read the disclaimer of opinion? Let's see what that's all about.
Okay. A disclaimer of opinion is issued in either of the following cases: when the auditor is not independent, when there is a conflict of interest, when the limitation on scope is imposed by the client, and as a result, the auditor is unable to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence.
Wow. So now we come to the fourth opinion. If you get a disclaimer of opinion, then you have a serious problem, maybe all more serious than the first three. Okay? At least in the first three, you have an independent auditor who says the financial statements are not complete in terms of meeting generally accepted accounting principles, the scope is limited because we can't get everything we want, and therefore it's adverse, which is not good. But at least it's coming from an independent auditor. Under disclaimer, the auditor is not independent. They are compromised for some reason. Whatever the reason, they're related to somebody, they worked for the firm before, they have a relative working for the firm, and so on. They have a relative in the firm who is working in the audit firm that's doing the audit. Whatever the reason that gets in the way of independence. By the way, the question of independence came up with the selection of the provisional liquidator. Did you catch that part, anyone? There's talk that the provisional liquidator, anybody knows who the provisional liquidator is? For FTX Bahamas?
PwC.
Not the
think it's been-
accounting, not the accounting side, the law, legal side, the law firm.
I didn't hear. Is it McKinney?
No, not McKinney.
Is it Graham Thompson?
Not Graham Thompson, the other one. Starts with P.
Philip Galanis?
Not Galanis. He's an accountant.
Oh gosh.
Starts with P, I believe. Trying to remember the name.
Legal.
Peter Coles?
Not Peter, but it is. Yeah, it is what we call a County Joe law firm. Does that help anyone? When you check it out, you'll see. But the question is, in terms of independence, they discovered that the law firm where they chose the provisional liquidator has a brother who's sitting on the SCB board.
You're not talking about Peter Maynard.
Not Maynard. It's a white firm. All right, when you check it out. The question is, that is clearly a what?
Conflict of interest.
Conflict of interest.
By all means. And there's no, how can you exercise any independence with that kind of conflict of interest? In theory and in practice, it should never happen. Welcome to governance. All right, so the disclaimer says the auditor is not independent, so therefore you cannot even give an opinion of any substance. Secondly, there's a conflict. Yes, question.
Sorry, you were asking who the registered office is for FTX?
Well, not really, but that answer would be helpful.
That would be Clement T. Maynard.
Yeah, it's the registered office. Yes.
Is the liquidator Lennox Patton?
Yes, Lennox Patton. Thank you very much. Okay.
Yes.
So the RA is the Maynards. Oh, yeah, anyway, that's another story. I won't go there. And the provisional liquidators are Lennox Patton. And the provisional liquidator from Lennox Patton has a brother who's sitting on the securities board. I'm not calling any names, but that is clearly a conflict of interest and a lack of independence. And I raise it to show you how current this stuff about disclaimer of opinion is in terms of the accounting world, but by extension, the implications are the same. A lack of independence and a conflict of interest. Whenever they exist, you cannot even give an opinion. You have to give a disclaimer. And what does that disclaimer have to be from the audit firm? That we cannot give an opinion because we are not independent and there's a conflict of interest. See? And thirdly, we cannot conduct this audit because we do not have sufficient evidence, period. Not in part, period. So there you have it. The unqualified, which is fabulous. The qualified, which is not so fabulous, but not so bad. The adverse, which does not give you a great feeling at all. Creditors and others do not want to see it. The audit is subject to all kinds of problems, and the disclaimer is an absolute no-no. Okay? Nobody wants that opinion to be applied to their firm. Okay? All right. And then finally, let us distinguish between the internal and external audit. We may have referred to it at some point before, but let us distinguish one more time. Let's see who's going to distinguish. Okay, Janisha, why don't you read that last page for us, distinguishing the difference between the internal and the external audit.
I'm driving, Mr. Wilkinson,
Oh, you're
unfortunately.
driving. No
Yes,
problem.
sir.
Don't mess with that. I don't want anything happen to you. I don't want that on my conscience. I have enough problems getting ready to grade your papers next weekend. Okay. We'll find a pinch hitter for you. Let's see what's the pinch here.
Hi,
Hi, Gia. Are you on the ground?
I am in the chair.
Are you in a position to read the last page?
I sure am. I'm so excited to do so.
Wonderful. Let's then let it rip, the difference between internal and external audit.
Okay, difference between internal and external audit. The internal audit activity helps an organization accomplish its objectives by bringing a systematic, disciplined approach to evaluate and improve the effectiveness of risk management control and governance processes. An external audit is generally one done in accordance with specific laws or rules of the financial statements of a company, government entity, or legal entity or organization, and is independent of the entity being audited. External auditors normally address their reports to the shareholders of a corporation.
Thank you very much. So make sure for not only for test purposes next week, but for your practical experience when you move along well into your professional lives, make sure you know the difference between the two. The internal auditor is usually hired by the company and reports to the board of directors. Any findings that are adverse and needs to be corrected. And the external auditors are also hired by the boards and the board's audit committee to come in and conduct independent audits of the company's financial position. Okay? That report the board will see, but it's addressed to the shareholders or the owners of the company. Very important difference to know. All right. So we'll stop there as far as financial literacy is concerned. I believe we've seen some rather interesting things over the last couple of weeks on both sides of the fence. And hopefully long after you guys have completed your examinations and moved on, that you would bear in mind that these things are not to be forgotten because they will affect your lives as long as you're a professional and even outside of your professional life. Remember, governance is not only how we behave in firms, it's also how we behave individually. All right. So the only other thing I want to mention at this point is I want to bring up a document for us to look at for a few moments. You will not be tested in your final exam on this, but I would like for you to see some of the points that are actually made in this document. Let me see if I can share the screen so I can find a reader. Can you guys see that screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Let me just, you can still see it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great, great. All right, now, this information is about market compliance, and it talks about the importance of financial compliance within the market. And when we talk about market, in this case, we're basically talking about the securities and investment market, where some of you might be aware that there's a whole lot of fraud going on, past, present, and in the future, without a doubt. So I just want to introduce you guys to a few of the thoughts of the requirements that are expected for those persons who are in the compliance, market compliance, and making sure that you have at least an awareness of the kinds of things that should be considered in the investment market. Remember, the investment market is where people invest tens of billions of dollars, including FTX and all the other crooks and frauds and so on out there, trying to run off with people's money, trying to make a decent living, trying to make a return on their investment, trying to put something away for their savings. So the investment markets are very important for everyone, and the criminals are well aware of that as well, and they keep trying to get their share. Some of them far too successfully. All right, so I need somebody to begin reading for me. What is market compliance? Anyone? Volunteer. Volunteer going once.
What is market compliance? It is the process to comply with all applicable laws and regulations that govern the securities or investment market through the development and implementation of policies, processes, procedures, and practices. Such policies, processes, and systems are developed by the management under the supervision of the board of directors. The aim is to ensure that applicable regulations related to markets compliance are compiled within letter and spirit by all the employees, including the management. All the markets dealing in securities, shares, bonds, and other instruments are cumulatively required to follow the respective applicable market regulatory requirements while developing and implementing the market compliance policies and procedures. Continue?
Keep going, yes.
Investment companies. The investment companies, brokerage houses, and investment advisors have attracted great attention from the security market regulators internationally due to various factors, which include the global financial crises. Many international investment companies and stock markets have faced a significant decline in market performance, and various have been levied massive penalties on account of non-compliance with securities market regulatory requirements. The financial institutions are now undergoing a shift in their approach toward market compliance risk and its proactive management, wherein more quality resources are being deployed to protect the investors' interests and maintain transparency in the financial market.
Before you go on, Tracy, let me just say this. Notice what she said earlier. A lot of firms have been fined because they didn't comply with the regulatory requirements. My question is, I wonder if the Bahamas will get any money in fines out of FTX for non-compliance and breaking certain regulatory rules. That will be interesting to see.
Well, I know the Securities Commission just recently updated their penalties.
Yes.
And how much they can actually charge firms for infractions.
Yes.
So it's going to be interesting to see which side they come down on with that.
And whether they collect the maximum from them just for the record, just to send a message. See, just like being able to say on the front page, Sam Bankman arrested and questioned, that should have been on the front page, even if he was let go. And secondly, we need to be able to say the Securities Commission has levied the maximum fine allowed by law so that the international community can begin to change their view of
the first thing they try to do is get established jurisdiction, right? Because he went and filed for Chapter 11 in Delaware. So the US is trying to take jurisdiction to get first crack of seizing any assets.
Yeah, and
So
they could get first crack of assets anywhere except where?
in the Bahamas.
Full stop. See my point? Anybody could crack anything. The question is, are we going to allow them to take possession of assets in the Bahamas that we need to control until we get things sorted out? See my point?
No, that's why they're fighting that.
But we better fight it, or else we're going to have another reputation to go along with the others.
I mean, this sounds like a Goliath, David and Goliath scenario.
Well, we shall see. Remember, if we have it in our accounts, we should be able to control it. If we give it up, the question would be, why did we give it up?
Yeah.
That's a whole different problem. In the meantime, some might be, I don't know, jump off the planet, went to live on the moon. Who knows? We'll see. All right, keep going.
For markets compliance, the companies develop and implement the securities trading policy, which must be complied with by all the employees. Employees trading in securities or shares is subject to take prior permission. Directors and all employees are precluded to limit their risk from investing in shares, rights, or options where entitlements are unvested.
Now, let me just say this. The reason why that policy should be in place is because they've found over the years that many traders get involved in unauthorized trades, lose a bunch of company money and investors' money, and put the company in dire straits, including liquidation and bankruptcy. Okay? Because we call them, for example, rogue traders. Nobody's checking them, so they're out there doing whatever they want without any regulatory or even compliance requirements from within the firm, not following the policy, and nobody's making sure that they are. Okay? Very serious governance issues. All right, keep going.
Where'd we go? Oh. Management of compliance risk. The management of compliance risk is the first and foremost responsibility of all the employees. However, the primary responsibility of establishing an independent and effective markets compliance culture rests with the board of directors of the respective company.
Come again, yes.
Starting from the top. Companies put in place a markets compliance program to ensure that all applicable market laws are complied with in letter and spirit, and thus minimize legal and markets compliance risk. For this purpose, the board of directors appoint or designate a suitably qualified and experienced person as markets compliance officer who reports directly to the president or chief executive officer of the company. Market disclosure policy. The market disclosure policy of the company includes a vetting and authorization process so that all disclosures related to the investments in securities, bonds, or equities are factual, do not omit material matters, and are expressed clearly and objectively. The policy also outlines how the company identifies and distributes information to shareholders and the market generally.
In other words, no lying, no misleading, no defrauding. That's what that market disclosure policy is all about. It's designed to get everybody in the firm from the top to the bottom to understand that we will not tolerate any untoward, no lying, no false disclosure, no defrauding, no misguiding. All right, keep going.
To ensure compliance with market regulations, the compliance officer ensures that the company is primarily compliant with applicable laws and regulations, including the prudential regulations that govern the securities market, guidelines for the Know Your Customer or KYC, anti-money laundering laws, AML, and regulations for onboarding potential clients. The compliance officer ensures that all the transactions and activities performed on behalf of the investors or clients are recorded, and confidentiality is ensured as required by the local laws and data protection requirements. Companies communicate with shareholders and other stakeholders in an open, regular, and timely manner so that the market has sufficient information to make informed investment decisions. Markets compliance requirements also require the submission of accurate data to the regulators and reporting of suspicious transactions to relevant regulatory agencies.
Thank you very much, Tracida. That information, that's where we're going to stop. I just wanted to end it with, first of all, a reminder about our governance and regulatory responsibilities, and to introduce you to the fact that the securities market is just one of the areas in the entire market of the world in which our firms operate, where we also have policies in order to control what's going on within the firm, to make sure that investors are happy and comfortable with the investment practices within the markets, and that their monies will not be misused and abused. Notice the compliance officer's job is to make sure that all of these policies and procedures are being adhered to. And if they find anything to the contrary, their responsibility for governance purposes is to report them to the board of directors. Once it gets to the board has a responsibility now to make sure they do something about it. A lot of times you send reports to boards, they don't do anything. They let it sit for one reason or another. That alone, inaction, not doing anything, is poor governance. And that in itself is a no-no. Okay? Just the board simply saying we haven't gotten to it yet, that's not a sufficient offense. Anytime the information comes from the compliance officer, the internal auditor, or any such source, the board's responsibility is to act on it, and to act on it immediately until the matter is resolved. And let's not forget the final point she makes at the end. In the markets, as it is everywhere else, okay? The reports that are going to regulators must be accurate data. Don't make up stuff. Don't lie. That's poor governance. Don't deceive the regulators or seek to deceive them. And most of all, if there are suspicious transactions, under law, you're required to report them to the Financial Intelligence Unit of that particular jurisdiction. It is an offense by law in most jurisdictions to not report suspicious transactions as they occur. Okay? If you have a suspicion, by law, you're required to go to your money laundering reporting officer and report it. If you don't have a money laundering reporting officer, you should go to your compliance officer. If for some reason that company does not have a compliance officer, that's a serious governance problem to begin with, but go further up to maybe to the head of accounting or senior management and report your suspicion. And once you report your suspicion, then whomever you report it to has the responsibility to report it to the relevant Financial Intelligence Unit. If something happens in your firm and your name comes up and it was believed that you ought to have had a suspicion based on that situation and you didn't report it, you could still be indicted through the courts by law for not reporting. Okay? And that goes for any individual who works for any financial institution, or maybe in some cases, non-financial institutions, but certainly financial institutions. All right, so we'll stop there. I hope that little reminder at the end was sufficient just to close your thoughts on the importance of good governance within any organization. I think we've made that pretty clear up to this point. And so I encourage all of you to go out and govern yourselves accordingly. All right, don't forget, any persons who still have case studies, please send them to me sometime this weekend, which will be the cutoff point after tomorrow. And your examination, of course, is next week, Saturday. I already indicated to you, if you cover the key stuff that we looked at, if you cover the definitions and know how to do simple financial statements and entries and all that kind of stuff, know the different types of audits, the purposes, be able to define, explain, etc., you should be fine. Okay, there will be no surprises on that particular final exam. So all you need to do really is just go ahead and prepare as usual. All right, any questions before we break?
Mr. Wilkinson, we may not speak after today, but I just want to say thank you for taking the time out to teach us about corporate governance and finance, and hopefully we meet in future endeavors.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for that. And it was my pleasure, 100%. You guys were absolutely amazing. And I just want to encourage you to get out there and do your thing. Don't let anybody persuade you to, like the kids say in school, do no egg. All right, good stuff, and continue to do well. All right, and good luck in your finals next week. Of course, I'm available even after your examinations are done. If you have an issue, you get stuck somewhere, and you'd like to get an opinion, please feel free to send me an email. I will be happy to respond. Just let me know which one of my great students you are, and it would be my pleasure. Okay? Did you
It's a
guys
pleasure.
hear?
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you, Mr. Wilkinson.
Thank you
Take
too.
care,
Okay.
everyone.
Everybody.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye, everyone.
All right. Okay.
Everyone.
All right. Good luck.